Hello, everybody, and welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, October 15th. Holland Squallen, Tla Squamish Okmeo. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. I just wanted to share a quick story of on Friday, I was asked to witness a ceremony, a land blessing for our new park, Honiak Park, where construction is about to be commenced for construction of the sea dike, as well as the completion sort of a park. And it was great to be able to spend some time with the Squamish Nation and hear about the importance of that space, and for having spaces to come together and gather for the nation. And I think this is an area where we have strong alignment. So it was great to be able to spend some time with them, and I look forward to the Honiak Park project moving forward. And it was great to share this land blessing and advance things in a good way as we move forward. Moving on, please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have any concerns, please notify our corporate officer present at this meeting. Could I have someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Councillor French, second by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We have no delegations, petitions, proclamations today. Item 4 is consideration of unscheduled public attendance. This is where if anyone has a matter that they wish to present to council on that is timely or emerging in nature, that needs to be addressed now versus a forthcoming meeting, this would be your opportunity to present that. Seeing none, we'll move forward. Oh, this would be the time. Yeah. So I'm looking for someone to. Okay. So perfect. So what we'll do is I'll just run you through how this works before you. Is that the procedure is that first you present to council on why the matter is important and you should be heard from this evening. And then the second piece is presenting on the matter. I know these things are sometimes related, but it's an interesting thought exercise. Then council will discuss whether we should hear further from you on the matter this evening. And then there's a vote on that. If it's successful, then that will happen later at the appropriate point on the agenda. So you can approach the podium and just make sure we get their camera up and so on. The mic should just turn on automatically. Okay. If you could start by with your just your name and neighborhood, and then you have, I believe it's 3 minutes. It's 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes on the urgency of the timing of this evening. Yeah. So the floor is yours. 2 minutes.
Okay, my name's Andreas Ewan. I'm a resident in Dentville, address 38800 Newport Road. What I'd like to bring up is regarding the rezoning development for the property on Britannia and Garibaldi Avenue. I don't know the street addresses, but I think it's the primary item on your agenda this evening. My primary comment I'd like to bring up is regarding public safety of the residents of that development and also of the neighborhood, and also in terms of usability for the residents of this proposed townhome facility, in that there is only one entrance in and one entrance out of a 29-unit townhome complex. On Medill Street is, I think, the current proposed in and out, where I developed my property right across the street on Medill Street, initially proposing a triplex, but because I was not able to access the property from Medill Street, we changed our plan and had to go to a duplex layout so that we had a laneway and a street access. And part of that was engineering saying that because there is a laneway, there is no opportunity to put a street driveway or driveway onto Medill Street, because we had the two other accesses.
Okay, I want to. I'll I'll stop you there. The urgency is that you'd like to speak to the matter that's on the agenda this evening. I just want to, I'm just trying to,
Yeah, if you
I
condense
think we're
it,
getting
then
too far into
come
the,
into more detail
into the
later.
next bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So council, we have a request from the public. Yep, go ahead.
Just a process question. I think our council has erred in general on the side of hearing from people, but my understanding is the new provincial rules are that we are not permitted to have a public hearing. And so I'm wondering, I would like some clarity on if we're treading on dangerous ground in terms of our decision if we then hear from the public before this, where public hearings are not permitted anymore explicitly.
Yes, thank you. I'll go to our staff to comment on the procedural portion of this.
You're correct. This development is prohibited from having a public hearing. The council procedure bylaw doesn't restrict council from hearing unscheduled public attendance related to specific items on the agenda. There is risk of this becoming a public hearing, but it is at council's discretion.
I feel like you have I'm going to leave the follow up to you. I might have one of my own. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just sort of, is there a way to mitigate that risk? Like we just hear from the one person that requested, or how do we sort of avoid this risk? Or is there a...
I'm going to go to CAO Glenday on this.
Thank you, through the mayor. This is one of those situations where it's council's decision. There is risk involved, and that's council's risk to evaluate and decide.
Okay. Sorry, we're just in the midst of a procedure that we will actually have an opportunity to maybe perhaps use the same mechanism here. So just, we got to get through this first piece, please. So council, we've been asked to hear from someone on this matter. We've had some caution from our staff, but we have discretion on this. I'm looking for the group. Go ahead.
I'd like to move that we hear from the member of the community. I recognize that there's a risk of this becoming a public hearing. I want to advise the public that this is not a public hearing, and this is not, we are hearing from the public. Yeah, as opposed to being a public hearing, and there is a legislative difference between the two. So with that, I will ask that we hear from this, at least this one member of the gallery.
Okay, are you seconding that, Councillor Greenwell? Okay, Councillor Pettition.
And I just, to clarify what the risk would be, for example, that the proponent would then say the process was unfair and there would be a judicial override and a judge would decide to maybe grant the zoning. And so we are trying to, I believe, if I'm understanding, ensure that whatever decision is made is the council's decision as opposed to a justice. Is that sort of what we're trying to protect against?
I think that's a fair assessment, but I'll go to our staff to clarify if they would like.
There are procedural fairness concerns. We have not notified the public that this is a public hearing because that is restricted. So there is a chance. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Other comments on this? I'll support hearing from as requested here, but we're operating in a new regulatory environment that is a change, and it represents a change for the community, and it also represents a change for us at this table, and when and how we can hear from the public. So I think that our package included a lot of correspondence, and that was the way to hear from the public on this particular topic. But in recognition of the new change, that's new for all of us, and we're not all absolutely comfortable with how with these pieces of change, I'll support it at this point. But that also has limits because because of the risk that it presents. Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be voting in support of hearing from Mr. Ewan this evening. And in voting in support of hearing from a resident, I want to thank those residents who have already corresponded with us by email. As the mayor points out, there's been a fair amount of information sent to us, and further encourages if there's anybody who hasn't shared whatever thoughts they have on the development to please do that by email, because at this point, that is the best way to communicate concerns or support, whatever there is to communicate about the project. So having said that, though, I would like to hear from Mr. Ewan this evening.
Okay, Councillor Pettingill.
I'm not going to support this. I think I do have concerns. I would like this decision to be a decision of council, and I am concerned about the risk, especially if the decision that council makes is not favorable to the proponent. I believe we're tying our hands from the decision that I suspect people in this room might prefer. I would suggest that if we feel we would like more time for people to correspond with council and so on, we might want to defer this topic rather than having what might be considered a public hearing tonight. So for that reason, I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
I will be in support of hearing the applicant for one reason. I understand, I gather that he wishes to emphasize an issue of safety, of public safety, and one that I have not seen emphasized, and has a particular kind of angle or perspective on this. And for that reason alone, I would grant to hear.
Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor and oppose? Councillor Pettingill opposes. Motion carries. So thank you. We'll work with the agenda for the applicable spot. That's your mission accomplished for this phase. And then this is where, if anyone else wanted to address council, this would be your opportunity to make the case for doing so this evening. If there's anyone else, seeing none, we'll move ahead with the agenda. Yep, that's. Oh, sorry. To do to address council, we go at the podium, and then the folks joining us online and the recording can
they see me.
Yeah, and if you could start by stating your name, neighborhood.
Is Stephen Thomas Scully, and I live on 38728 Buckley Avenue. I have many family members in Squamish. We are hardworking people. We are industrious and have helped to build this community. And we believe in stopping a lot of development. We've had enough. I will take this on gladly with all my friends. I would like you to tone down the size of this development. I think it's time for you to grow a backbone and say, we've had enough. This development is oversized. So I know you're all...
Sir, I need to stop you just for a second. Is that I was attempting to give direction. Right now, I know this is...
Did that go out on... I want people to hear what I had to say.
That is going out on... But the procedure right now is that you've got 2 minutes to address council as to why you should have time to... why this matter needs to be addressed this evening. It's a 2-part equation. I know it's counterintuitive, but this is the process we're working inside of.
I'll go back.
Yeah.
I'm back. It's a beautiful neighborhood. I'm going to leave it that way. And I expect you guys to have some strength and stand up for the community. For a chance, just say, hey, this is a beautiful little neighborhood. We don't need it this big. We love to watch the kids. We love to engage in our festives of Halloween, Christmas, Easter, Diwali, whatever it is. And I expect you to stand up to keep us with our neighborhoods and our yards and everything. We're not bad people. Actually, we do a lot of great things. for everyone. So that's my point. Now you can ask me a question.
Okay, thank you very much.
You didn't ask me a question.
So we're that's not how this portion works. I know it's
Well, someone's going to lead, say.
this-
Well, I guess it's
this-
me, eh?
this format.
It's pretty good. Let's ask
Sir,
you guys a question.
if we could-
So,
Sir, sorry, I have a process that I'm required to
yeah,
to,
well, I
to
have a
follow.
lot of respect for that right now.
So, well, this is the process that we're
Make sure that
engaged in.
goes on air.
That-
Okay, make sure it all goes on air. You listening to me? I don't like
Sir,
it. What?
I'm gonna need you to just, if you could just let us do the work that we need to do here. Then
do
we
your
can
work.
get to the other. I'm attempting to, but I need you to.
Tell them
just
to do
be-
their work too. Go knock on
Sir,
the doors.
if you
I've
don't
never seen
allow the
English-
process to continue, I'm gonna need to ask you to leave. So if
No
you
worries,
could, we're
man.
trying to get our work done at the request of the community, including yourself.
I tell my sons the same thing.
Okay. So, council, we have opportunity to hear from more than one. We've talked about the risk that we've introduced into this, into the process. And I for one, am, I was just comfortable with one. I don't know that we need to introduce more to this process at this time. So, but it is at the will of council. Seeing no hands for further submission later in the meeting from the speaker, we'll move forward. So moving forward, we are on to our consent agenda. If anyone wants to pull anything from the consent agenda, some minutes there, some correspondence. Is there? Go ahead, Councilor Pennington.
Yeah, I'd like to pull 7A2 regular business meeting minutes from October 1st.
Okay. And we'll deal with those at the appropriate spot. Is there anything else to be pulled from the agenda? Seeing none. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering if we should suspend the order of the agenda to hear people before.
Yeah, I was going to do the consent agenda first, and we'll have that discussion.
Okay.
So moving the consent agenda, Councillor French, and seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So we do have, normally we hear from unscheduled public attendance later in the meeting under, where is it, item 19 or something? 19, unscheduled public attendance. So I'm going to, as Councillor Greenlaw rightly pointed out, I think that hearing from the public after the bylaw that they're wishing to speak to doesn't make a lot of sense. So I would suggest that it'd be appropriate to suspend the order and hear now some from the speaker that wishes to speak to this, and then we'll move on to the staff presentation on as scheduled. So if you want to approach, oh, there. So in this time, sorry, I'm just going to on the timing side. 3, 5. You have 5 minutes to address council on this phase. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the point I was trying to make regarding safety is the current design. I've gone through this procedure for my own property and development across the street on a much smaller scale. I don't see the sense in the design and the plan and the approval from engineering to give 29 units, which correlates to approximately 58 vehicles, one way in and one way out of the overall plan development. When there are Britannia Avenue, Garibaldi Avenue, and Medill Street access on 3 sides of the property. From the usability and functionality of those residents, it doesn't really make sense to me. From traffic flow in the neighborhood, if this does proceed, it doesn't make sense to me that it all goes towards one point in, one point out. I just don't think that it's going to be very comfortable for those residents or functional. If you've looked closely at the plan, it's a rather tight configuration of streets on the property. Further, you know, on the safety side of it, I don't see how that's going to work well for fire, police, ambulance either. If there were a vehicle, you know, going in the opposite flow, it seems to me like it's going to be a game of Tetris in and out of that property. With the, and I know their design and their plan was to pave over or fill over the ditch network that really is just on the Britannia side, I think, is the most significant ditch. But it seems like they could look at the layout, the plan, the unit count, and come up with something that works with both the park, which is nice, the retaining of the trees on Garibaldi, and still get maybe 1 or 2 more access points just to spread the load out and give a little bit more accessibility for the safety side of vehicle access. I think to Steve's point, and you know, I want to echo his sentiment. Ultimately, the majority of the neighborhood residents that I know behind me, we stand with Steve's comments that it's a lot of units on that property, and we'd like to see something better and something different than that ultimately. So I hope that you've read all of our comments, heard all of our comments, and taken those to heart. It seems to us like reading 1, 2, 3 slam dunk. I hope that that's not the case. I hope that there's a little bit more thought and a little bit more consideration to big picture in terms of how this is going to proceed and how this is going to develop. I know one of the residents has expressed a lot in terms of how the new R1 zoning would really achieve a lot more density on the property, but not go to this level of rezoning. So I hope that that's been heard and that has some teeth to it as well, because you guys invested a lot of time and money interpreting that new provincial expectation of the rezoning from R to R1. I think that's about the extent of what I want to try to achieve with communicating with you this evening. If there's any questions, I don't know if this is a back and forth, but that's it.
Okay, thank you. That's so this is that opportunity to sort of make a submission more than a conversation, but thank you very much for the for your submission. And I just wanted to clarify one thing, and this is true on in any or fairly, I won't say on any application, but quite frequently council will be a recommendation we made or brought forward for consideration of 3 readings, and it's up to council's discretion whether they grant all 3 readings, only 1 reading with notes and things to be worked on for the 2nd reading, or just a denial at that point as well. So there is a spectrum of outcomes, and I just wanted to make sure there just to provide that piece of context for the public, yourself and anyone else in the room that doesn't interact with these processes on a regular basis. So so there's a multitude of outcomes could be here. So thank you very much for your submission, and we'll move on now to the staff presentation on it, and we'll get into dealing with it. So
okay,
thank you.
Thank you, council.
Thank you. You, I will accept the apology, but that's okay. Thank you for sticking around with us. We will go to our staff now, and as they're getting set up, thank you very much for that. And we do request that as staff are presenting and council's going about their work this evening, that there is quiet from the audience so everyone feels, so everyone can participate. But thank you for that. I appreciate that. Okay, over to staff to introduce themselves and run us through the presentation.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Asia Philp, planner with the Community Development Department. I'm here tonight to present the rezoning application for 38779 and 38795 Britannia Avenue for consideration of first three readings. The development site is located in the Dentville neighborhood. It's bordered on three sides by Garibaldi Avenue, Medill Street, and Britannia Avenue. The site is comprised of 4 properties. The surrounding land use is all residential, zoned Residential 1 or R1. The official community plan land use designation is residential neighborhoods. Development permit areas 2, 3, and 11 apply. So this rezoning application seeks to rezone the properties from Residential 1 to a comprehensive development zone number 116 to develop 29 townhouses. The proposed townhouse site plan is shown here. A single access off of Medill Street is proposed. Residential parking is proposed within side-by-side garages, so 2 spaces per unit. There are 2 accessible visitor parking spaces proposed, and this does not meet the minimum zoning bylaw requirement. A visitor parking reduction is supported by staff, as Dentville is served by transit, and its proximity to downtown Squamish can encourage mode shift. On-street parking is also available along all 3 property frontages. Approximately 6,000 square feet of common usable open space along the Garibaldi Avenue frontage is proposed as a strata park. A public access statutory right-of-way would be secured to ensure this open space is accessible to the public and the neighborhood. A covered picnic area, benches, paths, and landscaping are proposed for this open space. A tree protection covenant would also be secured to ensure the existing mature trees located in the open space are retained. The rezoning application triggers the Community Amenity Contribution or CAC policy. The applicant has proposed $1,107,887 cash in lieu of critical amenities, as well as in-kind transportation infrastructure improvements, which include upgrading the 5-way intersection located at the northwest corner of the site to install a traffic circle and build out the 5 corners around the circle, as well as a sidewalk along Medill Street from the development site to Buckley Avenue. The critical amenity cash in lieu meets our CAC policy, and the in-kind road improvements exceed the active transportation and parks CAC policy target. A commitment that all the units will be powered by electricity will also be secured through a no gas covenant. So this is a comparison to the R1 zone. There's a potential to subdivide the property to create 6 R1 lots. And there's a maximum of 4 strata units that are developable on each of the 6 lots. And so that would make a maximum development of 24 stratified units. You can also have 1 either secondary suite or ADU on each of the 6 properties. And so this would be a maximum of 30 total units under the R1 zone. And in comparison, the CD 116 is proposing 29 strata units. Each of the potential R1 properties would be allowed a driveway, so 6 driveways total in comparison to 1 CD 116 driveway. Under the R1 zoning requirements, a minimum of 24 residential spaces would be required, 1 for each strata unit. In comparison, the CD 116 is proposing 58 residential spaces and 2 visitor spaces. There are larger setbacks in the R1 zone than proposed in the CD 116, but the lot coverage is 50% in R1 versus 40%. There's no maximum FAR limit in the R1 zone for multi-unit dwellings. And under CD 116, the maximum FAR is proposed as 1.0. There's also no common open space requirements versus in CD 116, there's a 12.5% common open space requirement. So to inform the community, per the district policy, the project was posted to the district's development review map, and 2 development signs were put up at the site. We held a project information meeting on May 29th, 2024 at the Squamish Elementary School, and approximately 30 members of the public attended. 53 public comments have been received and included in the package. The main public comments focused on the level of density, being too much density, neighborhood character, in that it doesn't fit the existing character, and around transportation, so additional traffic and a lack of active transportation and sidewalks. Secondary concerns included on-street parking impacts, stormwater management, and tree preservation. The staff are recommending readings of this rezoning application as it meets the district's official community plan policies by providing for an inclusive and diverse mix of housing options, by allowing a greater variety of housing forms and densities that fit within existing neighborhoods, and by increasing the amount of attached multifamily units and sensitively integrating this medium density residential use within the district. OCP policy also supports residential infill in all Squamish neighborhoods. This application allows for preservation of significant trees and additional usable open space for the neighborhood. And lastly, the 5-way intersection and sidewalk improvements in the applicant's CAC offer will enhance the district's bicycle and sidewalk network. So staff are recommending giving zoning bylaw amendment number 3033 first, second, and third reading. Prior to bringing the application forwards for consideration of adoption, staff recommends securing the applicant's CAC offer through a land development agreement that would include the 6 items listed here. And that ends my presentation and open up for questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, who questions on this? Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor. You note that there is no shadow study. Was one done? If yes, why didn't we see it? If no, why was there no shadow study?
Through the chair, no shadow study was requested at this rezoning stage. The height of the townhouses are the same as the maximum height permitted under the R1 zone. And we can also request shadow study during the forming character and development permit stage if desired.
Okay, I'm curious about the garage height, the garage door height. Will a Squamish minivan, also known as an F-150 or a Tundra, fit inside these garages?
Through the chair, again, that would be covered under the forming character development permit, not at this rezoning stage.
Okay, and I know that in the report to council, where it talks about the setbacks, the table that outlines the setbacks, one of the boxes in the table says not applicable, and it's a rear setback in the CD zoning. I wonder if you could give us some context for what makes that particular variable not applicable in this scenario.
Yeah, through the chair. So the way that the CD 116 zone is drafted is that there are setbacks that are specific for each street frontage, as well as the interior side setback. So rather than try to guess which is the front and which is the rear on this triple fronting lot, we've just specified the setbacks for each street. I didn't translate that well to the staff report, but it's outlined in the CD 116 draft zone.
Okay, yeah, I get it. Makes sense. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Hamilton and Penigo.
Yeah, I want to pick up. So there's a common thread of concern through a lot of the correspondence, the residents' correspondence. One of them is summarized fairly well. Parking is currently free. There is no incentive for people to avoid street parking. And I completely agree with that sentiment. However, in this instance, the current R1 zoning would allow less parking than is currently proposed and would result in less on-street parking being available. Is that correct? The current R1 zoning, because it would require so many driveways.
Through the chair. So the first part of your question about so it's a minimum parking requirement of 4 spaces. Anybody who would develop on an R1 lot could choose to do more spaces, but that's the minimum. And then, correct, yes, so you can't park within a certain amount for each driveway. And so you can imagine with the 6 driveways coming off of the 3 frontages, that would reduce the amount of on-street parking availability.
Thanks for the number 4 there. So it's maximum number of spot or minimum number of spots would be 24 parking spaces if they were to fully develop it using the R1 zoning, whereas now they're providing 60 parking spaces. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So it sounds to me like the parking here is more generous than what would be available or what would be required in the current R1 zoning. Is this now on to the number of units? Is this, and I'm going to use the word density here to mean number of units per acre or per hectare or whatever area you'd like to use. Is this out of character for a townhome development in Squamish?
Through the chair, the RM2 zone does have a density limit of 0.8 FAR. So this project's requesting slightly more than what the RM2 zone outlines, which is our kind of template townhouse zone. But not by much, by 0.2.
Yeah, thanks. And what I'm getting at is the FAR is a particular definition, right? The floor area ratio, which doesn't necessarily speak to the number of dwellings, because these are fairly large dwellings. These are 1,800 square foot, 3-bedroom townhomes, right? This seems like actually, compared to other developments we've seen, not that many units per acre or hectare. Am I correct in that, or am I misjudging number of units per square area, not FAR?
Through the chair, so I haven't done the math to figure out what 29 units per the amount of site area. We can take a time out and do that if you want to know that number. The number of units per hectare, the FAR is like a cake, and that developer can slice up the cake however they want to. They've chosen to land on 29. If they come forward for the development permit application, they could have more or less. They need to meet the parking requirements, but it's at the discretion of the developer to decide how they want to divide up their cake.
Thanks. And they're limited. Their cake is limited by the FAR. I
Yes.
understand. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I just want to understand. So there's been reference to 4 properties, 6 lots, I think. And then, it's on the pictures. It looks like there's 2 parcels. There's 2 numbers. I'm just trying to understand in terms of what's actually there now. Is this 4 properties in the context of our bylaw? So that is what would apply, and there's sort of 2 properties per lot, or?
I'll try my best through the chair. So in Dentville, there are some properties where there's been 1 house built, but there's 2 PIDs or 2 separate individual titles. This is one of those examples where there are 4 individual titles that comprise this development site. There are currently 2 houses that have been developed on these lots. The developer would consolidate these properties prior to moving forward with development.
And then in terms of consolidation or achieving the 6 properties you spoke to, do both of those require subdivision?
Through the chair, yes, but to do a lot consolidation, you can go directly to Land Titles Office. The district approving officer doesn't see these applications. If the developer were to sell or decide to go through a subdivision process under the R1 zoning, they could potentially develop up to 6 individually titled lots. And that would be under a subdivision process that they apply to the district, and it goes to our approving officer.
Okay, thank you. And then, you know, the 6 lots, assuming a subdivision is being referenced, is, I guess, there's a 2-part question. One, is subdivision something that council has discretion over, or is it as long as they meet some objective requirements, they can subdivide? I guess I'll start there.
Yeah, through the chair, council does not approve subdivisions. That's a delegated authority to staff, to the approving officer.
Okay, my understanding is when there's subdivision, there's often additional requirements, and it doesn't sound like subdivision is what's happening here. So would they be avoiding those additional requirements? And can you speak to what those are if we sort of said, no, go through the subdivision, do the 6 and whatever that allows? Would there be other things like we're using CACs right now to capture some sidewalks and so on? Would subdivision impose some of those requirements if they went the subdivision to 6 lots route instead?
Through the chair, I'll do my best, and then maybe we can bring on one of our engineers to talk about the subdivision process further. So this applicant is not going through this 6-lot subdivision. That was just an example I gave you under the R1 zone. If they were to do a subdivision under the R1, they would be required through the development process at some stage, not necessarily at the subdivision process, to do frontage improvements and to appropriately service each of the 6 lots. But they would not be required to do the off-site traffic circle sidewalk along Medill. That's not part of their frontage.
And then I guess the last thing, so we're using, I guess part of the discussion has been sort of about the fact that the new R1 is, you know, as if that's the target, or, you know, what council decided was acceptable. My understanding is that that's not necessarily the case. Like if we want to capture CACs, we would typically, after some consideration, allow for some more density and so on, and in consideration possibly of CACs if the sort of whole package made sense. And so that is sort of basically the discussion here today, and why we would consider more is because without granting a bit more density, we might not see a CAC offer. And so we're trying to balance is the sort of additional benefits from a CAC offer. Is it worth the additional density? Did I capture that accurately?
Through the chair, I think for rezoning, the developer is asking something above and beyond the R1 zone, and it's at your discretion to consider the merits of the project and make the decision. Does that address your question?
I'm gonna go to, if you want clarity on what you were seeking there, because I do think that was a fair assessment of where we are, both from yourself and staff. But do you have clarity? I just don't want to put our staff in a position that's for us.
Yeah, and I guess where I'm going with is we've sort of talked about this new tool, amenity contribution charges, which would otherwise deal with some of the same things. We're not there yet, so we've sort of set a base zoning, but the expectation is for the foreseeable future until that ACC is developed, we may continue to have these discussions where there's some back and forth about density for amenities, and sort of for the next foreseeable future, this is sort of the process that we expect.
Through the chair, that's correct. The community amenity contribution negotiations will continue until there is an ACC bylaw, and likely when there is an ACC bylaw as well for rezonings above density, there may be situations where we are still negotiating, but then that would preclude the ACC bylaw application at that time.
Okay. Additional questions before I have some of my. Okay, I'll come back to you. You've already had one crack at it. So there's a question earlier about the garage heights, and I understand that that's handled at development permit. Can you speak about what those conditions are at development permit? Because I think that the answer to the question, so are we sure that that will be secured at development permit? Because I think this, to me, plays into the parking requirement piece. I want to understand that. So what does that look like, and what do they have to do to achieve success at the next phase, if that is what comes to pass?
I'll start. So at the development permit stage, we have an ability to secure clauses within the development permit language itself. So we could add a clause that speaks to a minimum height for the garages and insist that we see them on the plans and see that those are carried through the building permit process. There are other tools. So for example, in the rezoning, we could add a garage height requirement straight into the zoning, but we typically haven't done that in the past. We could also add it into the land development agreement. Again, these are things that we normally capture at the development permit stage. There are different tools though.
Okay, and is that generally a goal, like more broadly, when something comes to development permit, that's what we're trying to secure there as standard practice, or versus council being concerned about that at this point?
I'll speak right now. Thank you to the mayor. So we do typically review usability of dwelling units at development permit stage, and that includes things such as garage height. Having noted some of the units that have been constructed in the last few years, we did note that the garage heights were too small, so we do try to capture that. Obviously that changes based on overall allowable height for a unit. You'll note the R1 zone and this zone have a higher height than what was previously allowable in the RS1 zone and other townhouse zones. So that height can then be used for garages more easily than what has happened in the past.
I see. Okay. And on this the parking piece, I find it is interesting, the sort of the possibilities under the new zonings, and it is challenging to think about where this property is. And this is maybe just commentary, like, what's there now versus what's allowed now versus what's proposed. There's sort of three different steps. From the parking requirement, that comment that was made that, and I saw it throughout the correspondence as well, that, garage parking being provided exclusively inside garages, folks feel it's a challenge, and I do as well, that's going to be used for parking and not for mountain bikes and snowmobiles and all the fun stuff that we use that need to be protected in garages. So how was there I can see the layout being challenging to do any sort of parking in front of each unit. Like the same number of parking spots, I think, actually operates quite a bit differently, whether it's inside a garage or if they're outside or split up. How in general are we thinking about that? And do our parking requirements currently contemplate them in a different category, or?
Through the chair, I think at staff's thinking at this stage is we've tried to regulate it through requiring a certain number be in carports. And at this point, I think we're letting the developers prescribe what they want to meet the market. And recognizing that there has to be some give and take to the product that they want to develop and what we're trying to regulate. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I think zoning bylaw treats all parking stalls equally at this time.
Okay. So the frontage improvements will still allow for on-street parking, like the final design yet to be determined exactly, but the intent would be that would continue under this proposal.
I'll invite Devin Keenog, our municipal engineer, to speak to the frontage design.
Thanks, through the chair. Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, very concise answer. That's fine. We don't need to. I can play the long-winded role here. If you, So further to that, the just a reminder that audience is here to observe the proceedings. There's not a further opportunity to participate, so we need to remain quiet, please. And having said that, my train of thought, thank you, the tree protection piece. Is that only protected under a rezoning? The tree protection, or is this, and how does that play into because this, the scenarios that we showed earlier with subdivision and so on, as we're contemplating going from what's allowed to this proposal, where does the tree protection fall into on that scale?
Through the chair, correct. So through the rezoning, council has discretion to ask things of the developer that they may. Our tree management bylaw would not necessarily protect these significant trees. They just have a fee per cutting down a significant tree or a number of replacement trees for cutting down. There's nothing protecting these trees. And so through the rezoning, that's how we have the discretion to get a tree protection covenant put in place.
Okay. I'm going to contemplate a few things here. I'll go back to my colleague here, Councillor. Oh, actually, sorry, it was Councillor Pettingill. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to clarify, when I asked about the subdivision, it's not a council decision, but in terms of, so it's delegated to staff, but it is, am I correct in that it is not a subjective decision? There's objective criteria, and as long as the proponent meets those, staff are required to grant that. So it's not like the public can appeal to staff instead. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's mostly correct. I believe the approving officer does have a certain amount of discretion to act in the public interest, and that is kind of open the same way that discretion in a rezoning is open to council.
If I can add to it, Jonas Wonisch is Senior Director of Community Development, also happened to be the approving officer. There is a provision for public acting in the public interest, and that's usually upheld through the court system in cases of things like emergency evacuation, lack of servicing, for technical reasons, essentially. So subdivision process is very much like a permitting process, just like building officials have certain discretion to have authority and responsibility over technical matters. It's a similar position for an approving officer. So it's not a discretional process unless there's a major servicing issue or a major emergency response issue.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks. Other concerns that were brought up both in the correspondence and from Mr. Ewan in his response to his request tonight, the traffic flow. Is that when does that get looked at in detail? What bodies? Is it within the council's zoning prerogative to define or describe the shape or structure or configuration of driveways, or does that happen later in the stage in the process?
Through the chair, rezoning does not hold typically doesn't hold where a driveway location is. That's something that is determined essentially at the DP or development permit stage through form and character and the layout of the lot.
And do you see any reason to believe that this proponent or this design will have difficulty meeting the DP requirements for vehicular access, either fire or private use?
Through the chair, no, they'll have to meet it essentially in order to be able to develop. That answers.
Thanks.
On the parking and maybe circulation as a whole, the visitor spots are two for this, which is one of the main variances that and both accessible, which means they're only for people that require those accessible spots. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. So we want to ensure that the minimum number of accessible parking spaces is provided on the site, and that's achieved through this development's visitor parking proposal.
And then is the waste and recycling room proposed to be accessed? How is that proposed to be accessed? Is it through one of those spots?
Through the chair, I think the development is not totally solidified in their site plan, so the access to the waste room is to be determined through the development permit process.
Okay, and would that process support access through one of the accessible, like an accessible stall? I just don't recall that. It appears to be what I'm seeing in the site plan that is presented, but would that evolve, do you think?
Through the chair, no, that wouldn't be permitted. We would make sure that there's a clear access into the waste room.
Okay. The other questions as I'm pondering more, we have, all right, my mind's working on this one. I think it's really I'm trying to reconcile the number of visitor spots proposed here versus what we'd see in, actually, was it covered in your earlier slide? Can you bring up the comparison slide again? I'm going from cryptic notes I made of your professionally. It was the comparison slide. Sorry, I think you went past it. This one here.
Yeah.
So visitor spaces. So is it the housing form that requires the two, like the accessible spaces, where at a private residence, we don't dictate that there's accessible parking spots, just general that there's parking spaces?
That's correct. So the multifamily townhouse form requires the accessible parking spaces versus an R1 development does not require any accessible spaces. I think inaccessible space is only triggered when there's 5 units or more on a development site.
Thank you. And then the baseline that you're using for CD 116, is that the RM2 zone? And it would have that higher requirement of, I don't know, whatever the requirement is for the visitor parking, which I know is likely more than the 2 accessible spots.
Yeah, through the chair, in our regular parking regulation section of the zoning bylaw, there's a requirement for any visitor parking, which is for any multifamily development, which is 0.25 spaces per unit.
Yeah, Councillor Penningham.
I was going to test a motion.
Okay, you're always welcome to do so.
I was going to test moving first reading, and if it's supported, I will speak to it.
I think there's a seconder there. One of the things just with this motion, I think that being explicit in the motion as to what is to be addressed or what should be changed before consideration of second reading, I think is important. So I see where you're going, and I think that's your intent, but I don't think that going for round of council comments is the best way to solidify that, because there may be some discrepancies on council as to what needs to be done going forward or what that threshold is. I just want to put that out for the group. I see everyone's mind working on a way through this. And all of this parking vastly exceeds the downtown standard. I just want to make sure we're clear on what standard we're working from.
Yep, through the chair, I can clarify, you're correct. The downtown parking standard is 1 stall per residential unit. So in this case, it would be 29 stalls, and there's no requirement for visitor parking.
But is there an accessible or otherwise?
The accessible parking spaces are required. They're captured under the residential requirement.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
This isn't a question to staff, but more of a comment for my colleagues. You've heard me say this before, but I want to say this within this context. I think one of the core issues we're struggling with here is what I said before from one of our correspondents from the public. Free street parking is an attractive alternative to gain extra floor space. That's not the quote I said before, but it was in the same line. And parking is currently free. There is no incentive for people to avoid street parking. I don't believe we should be defining or designing parking stalls in a unit, in a building. We should leave that to the developers. We should leave that to the designers. Let them meet the market. Our challenge, we also need to meet the market. We should stop providing free street parking in our neighborhoods. Therefore, it would incentivize people to purchase lots with parking. The money that we collect for that on-street parking can be used for the neighborhoods or for whatever we want to use it for. A piece we continue to struggle with is that we allow free parking on our residential streets. I'll just leave it at that. I know we can't solve that problem tonight, but that is how I perceive this challenge.
I'm not going to engage on that one quite yet, but I understand the concept. I think with the CAC contribution as proposed, I've heard from one of the pieces, if I parse out the pieces of feedback, is that those upgrades aren't necessarily seen as the benefit from some of the residents. Is this a placeholder to like, I guess, how did we arrive there? And is there a chance to maybe use those same funds in a different way at the direction of, with some more engagement with the community as to what those things could be? Like, just how did we arrive at what these were reasonable to discuss as part of this?
Through the chair, I'll start and then I might pass it on to Devin. We've at the staff level been engaging with this applicant in the pre-application meeting stage and then through the months of the rezoning. And we look at all of our district kind of wants and needs, particularly in the neighborhood where the rezoning is happening, and the sidewalk connection and the improvement to the intersection for safety improvements were identified at the staff level as being highly desirable and a good contribution to the neighborhood. Did you want to add further to that?
Yeah, I can speak specifically to those two additions, and it came down to a review of the neighborhood from a transportation kind of management perspective, and the main drivers for us were that we know as this area, if and when this area develops even further, that 5-way intersection is going to be problematic. We saw that as a big priority to manage that because it's a very uncontrolled intersection at the moment, as well as the pedestrian connection along the DIL connects that part of the neighborhood, and specifically from this development, which will have increased density, or which would have increased density, to our transit network, which is on Buckley. So that was why we centered in on those two main requirements. And then ultimately it was a balance between what we felt was reasonable for a development of this size versus, asking for additional items.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, I was just wondering if staff could comment as to the value of the roundabout upgrade.
Yes, through the chair, we've had the applicant's engineer do a ballpark cost estimate so that we could review it against our CAC policy, and their ballpark estimate was $500,000. Including the sidewalk and the intersection.
And to be clear, that the deliverable is that are those upgrades, even if that price tag comes out to be $1 million or whatever, we're securing the proposal is to secure those upgrades, and the dollar amount used right now is just to compare it against the CAC policy. But if it ends up coming out twice as much, that's on the proponent.
Through the chair, yes.
Yep. Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation of the first three readings.
Is there a seconder for the motion? We had one reading with no seconder, and we've got 3 readings, no seconder. I'm trying to figure out the path through here. Of course, the risk is if we do, I'm hesitant to second the third 3 readings at once, given if any of these motions fail, then the project fails, and that's might be fine, but I just want to make sure that that's the intention here. So
I don't have, so the reason why I'm putting forward first 3 readings, I don't see a fundamental objection at the zoning level for this development. I see concerns that have been raised that are potentially dealt with at the development permit and the design stage. But I haven't heard an objection that's appropriate at the zoning stage. So I'd encourage my council colleagues to highlight an objection or an item that they would like to see changed that is appropriate at the zoning stage.
Go ahead, Councillor French.
Mayor, I would like to hear more from Councillor Pettingill. I could see myself seconding first reading, but I need some meat on the bones. Like what are the concerns that Councillor Pettingill has that would be attached to simply going with first reading only? And if Councillor Pettingill has something he can share with us, I might see my way to seconding where the direction he wants to go.
Go ahead.
I'm happy to speak to it if I'm permitted to. I'm not sure. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess where I'm going is just observing the correspondence and the interactions this evening. It seems to me that many of the people in the neighborhood have not been clear on the process and some of the constraints we are working with. It does seem clear to me that what is on offer here is actually more parking, fewer driveways, more common space, more local amenities than what the proponent could proceed without us being able to say no to. And my reason, though, for only going first reading is to allow the community to sort of absorb that. I also gather from the correspondence that there's been dissatisfaction with the proponent. And so maybe optimistically holding out a bit of hope that there can be a bit of a conversation, understanding that this is what the context is, that there can be a little bit of a positive discussion and back and forth, and at least people can come to an understanding. And so I just wanted that opportunity for the reality of the circumstances so we all understand and move forward. And hopefully, if it's not everyone's perfect, at least there's some understanding of why we moved ahead. So just wanted to try and give that space. I would speak further to parking. I may have a different idea than some of my colleagues on that piece, but that I would leave to my comments for now if I was seconded.
I'll second your first reading, and for discussion, we'll see where this journey takes us. Would you like to speak to it further?
Yeah, I think I said much of what I wanted to say in that it does seem that for better, for worse, with the zoning we have and what the R1 allows with subdivision, which is essentially a non-discretional process, what's on offer here is a lot closer to what the community would want than it sounds like what they could do with a subdivision to 6 lots. And so I think in that context, it may make sense to proceed with this. Again, I would like to see a little bit, maybe there is a bit of discussion the proponent can have with the neighborhood and try and address some of the issues. I will say, I keep on hearing that, everyone here needs a big truck and toys and so on and so forth, but we're in an affordability crisis, and the crisis of affordability isn't the people with multiple vehicles and all kinds of toys. It's the people that don't have a home at all. And I think what we are seeing right now is the person with no vehicle or can only afford one vehicle that needs a place to live. They're having to compete with the people who have all the toys and all the vehicles and everything. And when we force people to build tons of parking, we're even raising the bar for those folks that are really, really struggling. And so I understand the idea that everyone would like everyone here to have big trucks and lots of toys, but that isn't the reality for people. And people who are really struggling need some options. The vast majority of our options, there's a ton of parking, relatively speaking. We're trying to provide some more options with a bit less parking. And that is where the actual affordability, the real emergency is. And so I think, the parking gets challenging when you try and fit 4 vehicles in a home that's built for 1. And many, many people are doing that. And that's why we have such a parking challenge. And so I think we need to really think about what is the problem we're trying to solve and how do we solve it. And so, I don't want to exacerbate things for existing residents, but as we think about where we need to get to as a society for new residents, I think we need some more options with fewer parking, and we need people to find better ways to hold people to those units that the number of parking spaces those units were built for.
Thank you. Other comments on this? Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
I would not be supporting first reading as proposed. This is a neighborhood I've been intimately acquainted with for all my life. The previous property owner on the north side, the Summerskills, were close family friends. And I have, from that perspective, I'm sorry to see that we will not be able to proceed with a neighborhood plan for Dentville. And I hope that the residents and the community understand how challenged we are. As we visited earlier in our discussions today, it's not that simple to launch that strategy at this time. So in this neighborhood are people who I have known to be taking initiatives to invest in the neighborhood, its heritage, its habitat, the riparian habitat, the wooded habitat. Some of those folks are here in the audience with us. I have also been a participant before I was on council in the Wilson Crescent neighborhood plan, and would have been excited to see an opportunity for this neighborhood to have that. But here we are. I'm actually convinced that the R1 zoning is the way I would prefer, and I do recognize the trade-offs. I've also noted a number of the concerns which I agree with from the neighborhood correspondence on sidewalk to nowhere and a number of things, lighting, water absorption, and so on. But I'm convinced that we need to face trade-offs here, and in this challenge, this difficult neighborhood because of its ancient history, but and including the traffic circle, these are trade-offs, and the parking is as well. But I'm convinced that we will not be doing ourselves a favor in our goals of increasing the missing middle housing supply here. I mean, that goal can be realized better in other locations. That is a development of that, such as the one proposed. It's for another location. For our goals, I think it would be damaging to our cause is our cause of densification and gentle densification in neighborhoods throughout the community to allow this to go ahead as proposed. The density and the character are the key issues for me as for the neighbors. So I'm not going to support first reading of this as proposed. I prefer to see going back to the developer and looking at other options such as an R1 zoning. Thank you.
Sorry, we need you to. So we need to remain quiet throughout this process. I understand the sentiment, but we need to make this ensure this space is safe for everyone to express their opinion either for or against any proposal. So if we could keep some calm, please. Councillor Greenlaw, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple comments. First of all, just to follow up on some of Councillor Hamilton's comments about getting the developer to meet the market with parking, is that we have, shall we say, gambled and lost with that quite a few times already with newer developments like Eagle Winds and Sea to Sky. And another thing you like to say is that parking isn't free. So leaving it to the developer to choose their parking stall designs results in an easy option for cutting corners by creating virtually unusable parking. But I do agree that it would be really nice if we didn't have to give input on that, because frankly, I don't think we should be giving a lot of input on design anyways. I'm going to echo a lot of Councillor Anderson's points. I have concerns about this development, this rezoning application not suiting the current neighborhood form and character. And I would like to see a lot more communication with the current community before moving forward with anything, frankly. I am also concerned about some of these amenities like the frontage build up for the sidewalk, but it looks like the sidewalk's just going to be stranded, which begs the question, with an influx of this many residents, up to 100 really, with 29 3-bedroom units, will this area be conducive to active transportations if that's the only sidewalk on the street? Yeah, and the other thing that gives me pause to approve this is, out of the approximately 50 submissions that we received online, not a single one was supportive of this rezoning, and many complained of a lack of opportunity for community engagement, and several were in favor of something more like what Councillor Anderson is saying with the R1 zoning. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Other comments on this? Councillor Pettingill, you spoke to this a couple times already, but.
Yeah, I'd just like to check with my colleagues, because it sounds like the two have spoken against it seems an implication that the developers held to the R1 as sort of, I guess what we've heard from staff is that under the R1 and subdivision, there could be a lot more density with a lot less parking. And we do not have tools to stop that. So I'm wondering if my colleagues, just for clarity, they are comfortable with that, or do they believe they have a mechanism to prevent that sort of subdivision and increased density that I'm not aware of? And I'm just sort of looking for that clarity.
If anyone wants to speak to that point, you're welcome to. I'll present that opportunity right now. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Just briefly, for the benefit of my colleagues, I believe I have considered that carefully, and I do see the trade-offs and handicaps with an R1. But overall, I think that there's opportunity to blend with the character of the neighborhood and having trade-offs less intrusive in the end with an R1 option. But I'm not willing to support the present configuration of this proposal.
Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
I just ask a question of clarification for staff. I'm quite sure we all know this, but I just want to make sure the R1 zoning option that we're talking about, the proponent will be able to execute without council approval, is more units, 30 units, not 29, more driveways, 6 driveways, not 1, fewer parking spaces, 24 instead of 58, with 0 visitor spaces instead of 2. Do I understand that correctly?
Through the chair, that's correct. And I'd also remind council that there's no longer a development permit requirement for anything that's 5 units and under. So they would not go through a form and character review process for an R1 development.
So my understanding of this application is that it is fewer units than would be allowed in the current R1 zoning with more parking, both on-site and on-street.
I think we need to make sure we only go to staff when we need clarity. I think that's more of a comment that I won't invite staff into. Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor. I have many concerns about this development proposal. It is right in the center, the heart of Dentville. And when this property is redeveloped, and I believe that is the case, it is when, it's not if, it will impact the whole neighborhood because of the fact that it is the center of this community. And what we're seeing in front of us is dense. And I take the point that the current owner of this property could go even greater density with the zoning that's in place today. I'm concerned about the limited setback to the neighboring home to the south. I think that's too tight. I'm also concerned that if we say no to this proposal, we'll never get the intersection improvements that I think are needed at that 5-way intersection. Less important, we also won't get sidewalks. And I recognize that some people feel that they are sidewalks to nowhere. However, anytime we can get sidewalks from a developer, I think we should take them. And these sidewalks in these locations, I think, will make this area safer. I am going to support first reading.
Thank you. So on this is a really challenging piece. I think highlights the challenges of the R1 zoning that comes from the province. Municipalities, including ourselves, have raised concerns around the need for investment in our neighborhoods to support the type of density that's being brought forward with the R1 zoning. And I think this illustrates that. We have community concerns around, and I'm likely to miss some specific ones, but around, parking availability, safety of movement around concern for the tree, concern for these large trees that are on the property, and that doesn't happen. Those things aren't addressed in a meaningful way under the R1 zoning. So to try to manage this, to address community concerns, it is a big leap from what's there. That much we know. It's very it's beautiful as it is, but what's allowed and what is likely to occur is something very similar to this R1 zone, which when I think about impacts into those concerns, the availability of street parking with the additional driveways, the things we have up here on this slide, this is really a tough piece. I would like to see us. I share concerns around the south setback. I don't know what can be done to increase that setback. That piece is important to me. I think that when we're relying on enclosed parking to meet our parking requirements, that sort of embedding some minimum dimensions there to make sure that works to the best of its ability would be appropriate. And I would I'd like to see that at second reading, something specific to that. I don't know how much the south setback can be pushed without having a massive impact. But I think realistically, somewhere closer to the RM2 zone, I don't know what a 0.8, if that actually addresses the community concerns. If we were to dictate a 0.8 FAR on this property, I don't think that, I don't know, that might be a trade-off that I'm willing to accept, that 0.2 difference between the RM2 zone and what's proposed here in the CD 116. And in general, I agree that downtown has a very reduced parking standard, and it kind of goes from downtown standard to the standard for the rest of the community, and it's quite a jump. I do think that this area being central does deserve somewhere in between the two, but I'm really challenged with the I guess providing visitor parking on the street, essentially, as we contemplate things like seasonal closures for half of this, or parking restrictions, and overall parking work that we're doing in the community that it's likely to result in at some point in the future, likely we'll have some resident parking only considerations and so on. So, but maybe that trade-off is something is something that we sort of accept as we have the parking for these units being provided exclusively indoors. I've never been invited to park in someone's garage when I went over to visit. So it is going to be on street. But to be fair, I don't know how many folks in this room or broadly throughout the community, visitors park on the street when they come to visit at single family homes too. So I don't, that one's a bit harder for me to justify. So right now I'm supportive of first reading, and versus third reading, providing all three at this point. I think it's important to sort of signal this is the direction. There's some concerns from this table and also from the community, and this hopefully could be some of these pieces could be addressed going forward. So for me, it's I'd like to see something securing that these the functionality of the parking and the southern setback, whether that's enough to get this its next two readings or not. I'm not sure, but that's what I'm gleaning from this today. And I think I want to acknowledge also the concerns of the community. Like we represent the community as well, but this is the conundrum that we're facing. And I think leaving it to R1 and to subdivision just to sort it out, I don't think is a better outcome. And the deal may not get better from here. So I think for that reason, I'm supporting first reading, and I'll continue to contemplate that as this comes back to us for future readings. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, just a final point of clarification. I think those of us that are supporting first reading are doing so to try and allow a bit more time and absorption and discussion rather than jumping to third reading. But if I'm not mistaken, there's nothing, one thing to keep in the back of our minds, there's nothing stopping the developer from saying nuts to this. I'm just going to subdivide it under R1. Like, they are not beholden to seeing this through necessarily. Is that accurate?
I would agree with that assessment. Yes. That is a risk of this course of action. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Anderson, Greenlaw, oppose. Motion carries. Thank you very much to everyone that came out and participated this evening, and keep the and thank you for all the correspondence we received on this file. Please continue to engage with the process, and we'll be hearing some more about this. I'm going to, where are we? We're down to the item, was that 9A2, fees and charges bylaw updates. Are you ready for that, or would you like a, yeah? we'll do a break after this, which thank you for coming this evening. No, we'll do a break after this and you guys can, yeah. We need to get the mic back on, sorry.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Asia Phillip, Community Development Planner. Tonight I'm presenting proposed amendments to the Fees and Charges Bylaw and the Land Development Procedures Bylaw for consideration of first, second, and third reading. Objectives are to present the proposed Fees and Charges Bylaw amendments. These cover two schedules of the bylaw, the business licensing and land development applications. And secondly, I'll cover the proposed Land Development Procedures Bylaw amendments, which focus on increasing the delegated decision-making authority for small-scale development applications. So quick background on what drove this bylaw amendment work. During the short-term rentals, or STR for short, Year 3 review back in February this year, Council directed staff to initiate a fees and charges amendment bylaw to streamline short-term rental licensing to reduce the administrative burden. Along with this STR work, staff included a few other minor fees and charges changes as part of our continual exercise of updating our bylaws. Staff have also included changes to the Land Development Procedures Bylaw to streamline application processing. So for STR licenses, staff are proposing to streamline the number of business license categories from 5 STR categories down to 2. The first category would be a new annual principal residence category with a $400 license fee per year. The second category is retention of the existing annual non-principal residence category with a $3,000 license fee per year, and this remains unchanged. The monthly license options would be eliminated, as well as the distinction between shared or private room and entire dwelling unit, as all these additional categories have created administrative burden for staff around monitoring of the licensed STR listings. The $400 annual principal residence fee is proposed and set for full STR program cost recovery. Staff are also proposing to remove the specific May 1st prorating date that only applies to short-term rental licenses, so that the short-term rental licenses would be the same as for all other business license types, having an August 1st prorating date. Other changes to the license section of the fees and charges bylaw include increasing the business license fee for automobile parking lot from $2 a space to $10 a space, and this is to align with other municipalities' rates. Updating the license fee for cannabis retail to align with licensing cost recovery by deleting the $3,000 fee for the first year of operation. Deleting business license fee categories that are outdated. These include mail order business, mobile canteen, and peddler. And lastly, moving film production company and temporary commercial vendor from Group B individual units to Group C itinerants, as these license types are temporary in nature and they should not be prorated. Moving on to the planning, land development application and service fee section of the fees and charges bylaw, proposed changes include adding development permit area 1 for environmental protection, so that's DPA 1 for short, to the development permit fee category for minor amendments to existing development permits, clarifying DPA 1 residential fees, adding a charge to DPA 1 for unpermitted work that has occurred before obtaining a development permit, adding a charge to soil management and tree management permits for minor amendments to existing permits, removal of the soil volume cap, and as this cap is rarely used in practice and is counter to our growing need for cost recovery. And lastly, adding the option for council by resolution to reduce, waive, or refund any development application fees for not-for-profit or for-profit childcare facilities. On the Land Development Procedures Bylaw, proposed amendments include delegating decision-making authority to the Director of Community Development for development permits, so DPs, that contain minor variances that meet both the delegated development permit and the delegated development variance permit criteria. Delegating decision-making authority to the Director of Community Development for DPs for a 100% affordable housing project to further streamline the development approval process for affordable housing. And lastly, delegating decisions on variances to the district sign bylaw to the director to streamline the district sign permitting process. Engagement on these amendments to the fees and charges bylaw focused on outreach to short-term rental business license holders and those community members who signed up to the district short-term rental mailing list. Public notification on the proposed changes to the short-term rental licensing were also included on the district short-term rental webpage and also in our e-newsletter. So staff are recommending that fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3106 be given first, second, and third reading, and that land development procedures amendment bylaw number 3117 be given first, second, and third reading. And with that, I'll pass it back to council for questions and comments.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. There's reference to volunteer member responses in Section 9 of the Fire Rescue Permits and Services, and we no longer have volunteer members. So what's the best way to clean up that language? Could it be incorporated with giving first three readings?
Go ahead, Mr. Vilniuskas.
Sorry. Thank you for the note. We can take that away and perhaps include it in the next amendment. We do fee bylaw amendments regularly, just not something that we recommend doing right now. But note taken, and we can make sure we address it in the future.
Okay, and the report to council indicates that if the proposed changes were in place before Spirit Creek was built, the Director of Community Development would have had delegated authority to issue development permits. So I'm wondering, does this mean that in the future, if a 100% affordable housing project of a similar size to Spirit Creek on appropriately zoned property, would council have any involvement in approval for that?
Through the chair, no, it would be delegated to the Director of Community Planning.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
And just on this point, which I think is interesting, that use is allowable in all, essentially allowable in all zones. So just to further to that, the appropriately zoned property is quite broad. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, a couple things. One suggestion is that council by resolution could waive fees for-profit, not-for-profit childcare. Legislatively, I understand the not-for-profit piece, but the for-profit piece seems to me that could put us offside of assisting business. And I guess I'm wondering why we just sort of wouldn't, as a matter of policy, waive these for not-for-profit, and for-profit would just pay them, and then we don't run into that assisting business, and we're sort of aligned with our what I think is our policy in terms of daycare.
Through the chair, I'm not sure if there is a question in there, if you could clarify to staff.
Maybe focus on I know the one question, but go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, doesn't this put us offside if by resolution we are waiving fees for specific for-profit businesses, which daycare or not, it's a for-profit business?
Can we take a timeout and we can discuss?
Sure. Let's just do a little bit more discussion. We'll put that on the category of things, just in case we stumble upon something else that needs that, as we're early in this discussion. Do you have another?
Yeah, the other one's probably more of a comment, but maybe, I don't know. Well, basically, I'd feel a lot more comfortable about the DVP delegation if it sort of came with a no gas covenant condition. And if that was in there, I'd feel more, I start to get antsy about these things if we're not having the chance to talk about the efficiency. So I'll leave that as a comment for now. Might be required to get my support on that piece. I think that's all I had for now.
Okay, other questions here? I was wondering about delivery, the Uber Eats, the like that category of things. It doesn't seem to be captured here. I know there's been some discussion around this ongoing. Some municipalities are regulating or business licensing this, and others aren't. Am I missing where that exists? Is that not the spot I should be expecting to see it?
Through the chair, so in the business licensing categories, there is kind of a non-resident catch-all for $130, and we often use that for licenses where there's not a clear other category where we can lump them into, and Uber Eats would fall under that. If somebody's operating and making money in Squamish, they need a business license, and so they should come in and get a business license for delivering food.
Okay, so that exists under that catch-all already. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions here. So we did have that one timeout piece around the for-profit daycare. And I think we've all earned a break. So we'll take, let's take 15 minutes right now, and we'll come, and that'll give you time to address this, and I'll roll into a little bit of a break as well. Okay, thank you. All right, and we're back. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back to staff.
I am going to turn it over to Jonas Vilniskis with a suggested motion.
Thank you. Just to provide some context, thank you very much for pointing that out. It is fairly gray when it comes to childcare provision because it is sort of an institutional use that has a commercial and a non-commercial aspect to it. And the challenge here with the way we have the bylaw worded is that it's up to council's discretion. When we waive fees for private businesses, in this case, it would have to be essentially either for everybody or for nobody. So staff would recommend striking out that or for profit out of the bylaw before giving the readings. So the suggestion motion would be to amend the bylaw section 214D by removing or for profit from the clause.
Okay. Do you have a yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's urgency here or if, because again, going through this process, I'd be of a mind to just sort of, rather than leave it to a council decision for not-for-profit, just waive the fees now for not-for-profit, which I don't think we could do on the fly. But is there sort of urgency? There's some sort of housekeeping or whatever amendments we want in tonight that's better handled with an update, or I'm just wondering if staff can speak to sort of timing.
Through the chair, there is some urgency regarding the business license amendments because we send out our business license renewals in November. So we need to budget enough time that we can get the renewals out with that most accurate information and not be scrambling.
Okay. Councillor Pettingill, your suggestion was around waiving the fee in general for not-for-profit daycares. That's what you were trying to get at?
Pondering it a little bit and wondering if we had a bit of time to sort of think about that and come back with an amendment, or it sounds like maybe that would be a subsequent amendment as opposed to something we'd handle tonight.
Is there any daycare? I know the needs, what was so I'm trying to remember the title of the report, the daycare needs and which set out targets for developing. Is that something that's on staff's plan to update and to like benchmark where we are, progress, that sort of thing? Is that something that's happening? I'm just thinking of other ways, other times we'd run into this, and if this action that Councillor Pettingill's contemplating or has brought to the table might be informed by something like that. Is that something that's happening? Like the daycare, another look at the progress or not in the daycare file?
Through the mayor, we don't currently have a large update to the childcare needs report currently scheduled. We have been annually looking at things we can do to improve zoning and process to facilitate that. So that's sort of ongoing maintenance of the actions within that, similar to what we do with the zoning bylaw. So it's not something that won't get looked at again in the future. It's just not scheduled as a major project or major update.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. I wasn't sure if it had a included a time for revision or to be revisited. So okay, thank you for that. Okay, Council, we've heard of we have the staff recommendation before us, and with the suggestion from Mr. Vilniskis, which I will move, including that recommendation. Are you seconding that? Yeah, I'll just be brief here. Thank you to all involved for the work on this. I think this is very technical piece, but I think yeah, I'm supportive of everything here. I do want to call out, to me, the biggest change. A lot of it was sort of fell into a category that I felt like was adjacent to housekeeping and tidying up some language and modernization. But the affordable housing piece, I think, is actually quite profound. We've given the ability for affordable housing essentially to be a allowed in all zones with its own set of criteria. And I think that sort of the final step of that here is appropriate, where that decision is ultimately delegated to staff, because it's supported by policy and by zoning regime that we've voted on as a council, and that's been our control. And so I do think that that's appropriate, and is another way that we can accelerate this type of development that we know that we need. Somewhere near a quarter of our new units need to fall into this category. So I see this as a small piece of the puzzle, but it could be an impactful one, as it does take a number of months to get on a council agenda. So happy to support the overall package, including that specific piece. Any other comments on this? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Brennan.
Sorry, we're voting on the fees and charges and the land development procedures bylaw separately. So
they have to be separate. Oh, sorry. My intent was they were together, but we'll do, so my comments go to the second one. So anyways, sorry. So I will move the first then, which is fees and charges. Was that what you seconded, Councilor?
I was seconding the fees and charges. But yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you for that. So it's late. I'm not going to go into more comments specifically on that, but others are welcome to. I'm not trying to put down if you do want to speak to, okay. I'll call the questions on the fees and charges. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Now I'll move the second piece. Oh, go ahead.
is the development procedures bylaw time sensitive?
Through the chair, no, but some of these applications that we're getting delegated development permits, and if they have any variance whatsoever, they have to go to council, even if it's something super small that qualifies under delegated criteria. And so that's kind of challenging from our workload perspective.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that one of the pieces here is council agenda time, and this might be a great time to point that out, as we've been at this a while today, and we've had a couple of recent meetings that were 12 plus hours long. So I think that this goes to that end as well, and the impacts of that could be felt more. I think us and our families would likely appreciate that happening sooner rather than later. But was there a specific piece that you were contemplating what triggered that question for you? But I want to make sure that our agendas and our scheduling is a key part of this as well. But go ahead.
Yeah, it's just with the delegation of DPAs, I've just had some discomfort sometimes with the different interpretations of DPA and where we can and can't push and so on. And so it's just sort of the broader delegation there makes me antsy. And I guess, again, this is where I would advocate for, when there's no gas covenant in place, that kind of gives me a lot more confidence in the sorts of things I tend to worry about. I'd be much more confident with the delegation. So that's something that I would like to see before supporting this. So I was wondering if there was the opportunity to come back with that. But
so the no gas covenant piece, does that live somewhere, or where is that captured? Should it live here? Does it live somewhere else? How do we address this piece?
Through the mayor, so currently all buildings are required to go to EL4 on the zero carbon step code, so are required to go no carbon as per our building bylaw.
I don't know if that gives you the comfort that you seek, but
I'm just sort of looking for any tools to get those covenants. And I understand we don't generally put the covenant in a DPA, but it's just, do the delegation, you bang, 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 you go, and that's how you sort of get it done, kind of thing. And so just look.
Well, we just said it was in the building that lives elsewhere.
Right, but here's a mechanism where we would accept delegation if that elsewhere was taken care of.
I don't think there's a way around the elsewhere in this case. Sorry, we're speaking in a strange code now, I realize, but is there a path? Was there a reason that I'm just struggling to see where what that path is that doesn't run into the regulation that guarantees the outcome that you're after. That's what I'm struggling for. Go ahead.
So again, in my mind, and maybe I'm naive or missing something, but the sort of policy would be that if there's an LDA that secures a no gas covenant, then we are totally fine to delegate the DPAs.
Mr. Vilniuskas.
There wouldn't be an LDA negotiation associated with development permit. That would only happen at the rezoning stage. And often we'll use variance process as a way at development permit stage to secure the no gas, which staff can still do through the delegated permits if there's variances. If staff bring in an application to council that has no variances, whether it's council or staff, there's no ability for us to require that above and beyond our bylaw requirements, essentially.
Yeah, and I, again, this is why I didn't propose a motion to adjust this here, because I think there's some details, but essentially if there's the opportunity to secure that, I would like that to, and then I'd feel comfortable with delegating anything else with the DP. Given the DPs, given the policy we have, but I understand there may be some circumstances where there's no variance and we just don't have that means to secure it. But for the places we do, was hoping to be able to do that.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton.
Maybe I can ask a question of staff to help clarify the situation for me. Are there any situations where somebody would be allowed to install gas infrastructure in a building using within the step code that they would be prevented from installing that gas infrastructure if there was a no gas covenant?
Through the mayor. If this was a recently constructed building under the current building bylaw, which essentially regulates both the energy source and energy efficiency, and it facilitates the no gas for the mechanical systems, and somebody after the fact went and installed a gas system, whether there's a covenant or not, they would be out of compliance with the building bylaw and their building permit. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It sounds to me like they're the same either way. If you install gas in a building that is built after the zero carbon step code is put in place, you're out of line with the building code.
Through the mayor, that's right.
I was going to go around the room just to make sure. I know don't worry. Any questions at this juncture?
I'm ready to move the staff recommendation.
Can I go back to Councillor Pettingill on this point?
Yeah, just given that last comment, I'll rescind for now and maybe push for a subsequent amendment at a later date. And I guess my understanding, and I'll seek clarification later, was that under EL4, that's sort of something that's verified. As long as you're compliant at that validation time, you can kind of do what you want after the fact. And that's one of the reasons why I've been looking to no gas covenants, is they're more long-term. And so if my misunderstanding there has been incorrect, that may impact a few things in my thinking. And so I will seek clarity on that. And if I feel that this requires a subsequent amendment, I'll push for that later.
Okay, so we had Councillor French. Are you moving the staff recommendation? Councillor Hamilton seconds. Comments on this? I've already spoken to it apparently, so I'll go to Councillor Anderson.
I'm happy to support the recommendation, but I'd like to make an observation on the no gas covenant topic. We have an updating of the Community Climate Action Plan forthcoming. There was an open house last week at the library, and this topic was discussed quite substantially among participants, including staff who are inclined to just a couple of things here. We're looking for energy system resilience also. We are also looking at electricity costs that have an uncertain future for the consumer. and we are looking at gas infrastructure that may evolve to be doing different things for us in future. So all these things are in play, and they're actively discussed in municipalities around the province, including City of Vancouver, as you may know. But my recommendation is that this topic be visited at a more broad level, if you like, and that may be the upcoming discussion of the review, updating of the Community Climate Action Plan. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That wasn't opposition, was it? No? Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So now we're on to some adoptions. We need to do these all individually. And for those watching, these are things that we've already been through council and now are to their final point. So we don't have any presentations, but we have quite a few to get through. So I'll need participation from the group to get us there. So first up, we have the soils management bylaw. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And I will move quickly here. So if you do wish to comment on any of these, I will be looking for you to wave your hands. So next we're on to permissive tax exemptions. The first up is the permissive tax exemption, Federation of Mountain Clubs of BC. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Motion carries. The next one is the for Sea to Sky Community Services, moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we've got District of Squamish Permissive Tax Exemption, Sea to Sky Montessori Society, moved by Councillor French. I'll second that one. All in favor and opposed? Councillor Hamilton, Pettingill, opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. And I just I do recognize that one of our councillors has declared conflict in the past on item 10 on this list. So I'll just skip past that until we get to the end, and then we'll come back to that one. So to attempt to streamline. So next we have permissive tax exemption, Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Squamish, moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor Anderson. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next we have another permissive tax exemption for Squamish Community Housing Society, moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Motion carries. Next, we have permissive tax exemption for Squamish Helping Hand Society and Under One Roof, moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Pettingill. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. This next permissive tax exemption is Squamish Helping Hand Society and pertains to overdose prevention site, which I will move, seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 9 on this list is a permissive tax exemption for Squamish Sikh Society, moved by Councillor French, seconded by myself. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And then I'm going to skip item 10 for you, Councillor, and then we'll come back to that. So moving on to item 11, which is a permissive tax exemption for the Nature Trust of BC, moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have a permissive tax exemption oh, these are bundled. So this is for 5 years, bylaw number 2934. And I will move that. Councillor French seconds. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And next we have the 4-year tax exemptions. And moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have some loan authorization bylaws. These have all gone through the public AAP process. District of Squamish. So this is the first one is for the Whitaker Slough Pump Station loan authorization bylaw, moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next is the Honiak Park Sea Dike loan authorization, moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. I wasn't kidding. There's a few of these. We're going on to item 16 now. This is the Loggers East drainage diversion pipe loan authorization, moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have the expansion of the cemetery loan authorization, which I will move, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And we're on to the final one, which is the District of Squamish Bridge Resurfacing Loan Authorization Bylaw, moved by Councillor French and seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Now, Councillor Anderson, if you want to state your conflict on item 10, and we'll deal with that.
Very good, Mayor Herford. I wish to declare a conflict on the item District of Squamish Permissive Tax Exemption application on the part of the Squamish Valley Golf Club. As a member of the affiliated curling club, my dues or fees can be affected by the fate of this application. So I will excuse myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't go too far. We've been moving through these fairly quickly. I would expect this one to be a similar pace. Let's wait till I know it's a delay. Okay, yeah. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries. Can someone see how far he got? And let him know it's safe to come back in. And we're on to the next piece is item 10A, community development. We have active transportation infrastructure grant to hear about. So I will turn it over to our staff. Thank you for your patience for hanging around to this late hour. The floor is yours. Take it away.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Reed Plaster. I'm a project manager with the Capital team, accompanied by Brent McMurdy, our manager of transportation here at the district. So tonight I will be presenting on a grant application seeking your endorsement to authorize staff to apply for 2 grants under the 2024 BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program, specifically Victoria Street and Depot Road. So a bit of context here. This application intake is currently open. It's open until October 31st. This program will provide up to 60% of eligible costs for up to 2 projects to a maximum of $500,000 per project. And as part of that application, we do require council resolution for endorsing us to put through that application. So we are proposing 2 projects to go into this round of intake. Victoria Street and Depot Road, both are active transportation upgrade projects. There's a number of requirements for this intake, and so both of these projects have been identified as they're in line with all of those requirements, as well as having previously been supported by council and aligning with our active transportation and transportation master plans. You would have heard Mr. McMurdy present on these projects, so they may look quite familiar from just a little while ago. But as a quick kind of overview of or summary of the 2 projects, starting with Victoria Street. So this will provide on all ages and abilities access through downtown, connecting the new pedestrian and cyclist bridge that will go over the Mamquamp Line Channel to a future bike avenue along 3rd Avenue. It includes kind of those separated bikeways as well as intersection improvements along with some other minor improvements along that corridor. The cost estimate for that project is just under $1.8 million with implementation plan for next year. Depot Road, so this is an active transportation project that extends from Government Road to Highway 99 along Depot Road. It's focused on implementing a kind of a quick build solution to provide a multi-use pathway along the north side of Depot Road. So this will provide a safe route to school, specifically by extending the roadway on the north side and implementing kind of that separation barrier between traffic and the multi-use pathway. There'll be also a number of improvements with crosswalks and then lighting upgrades along with those crosswalks. So the estimate for that project is just over $1.5 million with a phased implementation plan in 2025 and 2026. Apologies for a bit of a text-heavy slide here, but generally we're looking at carrying forward $1.1 million of budget that was identified for 2024 for the Victoria Street project, supplementing that with another just about $0.7 million. 0.5 of that would be the unsecured grant funding that we're seeking your endorsement to go after. The construction of Depot Road, again, is planned in 2 phases. So phase 1 would be 2025, about $0.9 million, again, including that unsecured grant funding, and then phase 2 happening in 2026. Our intent is to deliver both these projects in those timelines, assuming that we do receive the grant funding. But if we are unsuccessful in kind of receiving that funding, we would look to prioritize Victoria Street, implement that in 2025, and focus on delivering Depot in the future with reserve funds. So with that comes to our recommendation to authorize staff to apply for $500,000 in funding the Victoria Street Active Transportation Project through the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program, and authorizing staff to apply for $500,000 in funding for the Depot Road Active Transportation Upgrade Project through the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program. Sorry.
All right. Thank you very much. Council, do we have questions on these applications? Yeah, I'll go with Councillor Hamilton, then Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. When would the successful applicants be notified? Do they give a timeline for when they'll let us know?
Based off previous experience, I think it's spring 2025. So we won't know for sure until, yeah, I believe March 2025.
So is applying for this going to delay any progress on the Victoria Street project?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Through the mayor, but we're currently developing the detailed design for both Depot Road and Victoria, and so we would continue to develop that until the end of the year. The intent would be to tender Victoria at the beginning of 2025, kind of regardless of what the outcomes are with the grant application, and then put Depot Road forward for tender once we've confirmed how much of the grant funding we've been awarded, if at all.
So what I'm getting at is my only hesitation in applying for grant funding is that we postpone or delay the start of a project waiting for that grant funding. So I just, as long as we can protect ourselves from producing an unnecessary delay, I'm very supportive.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I have a question regarding the Depot Road project. For certain periods of time over the last couple of years, we've seen convoys of trucks come up from the Lower Mainland, and they are likely destined to the Chikai Sand gravel facility southwest of the airport, and some of these trucks are using Depot Road. I don't know whether you've been monitoring this. I know that some of the neighbors on Nepo Road have brought it to council's attention or a few times over the past years, past couple of years. I'm just wondering if it's something that we could do under this program, install some no truck route signage, unless that has already been done. Can that be something that could be entertained under this project funding program? Some signage for Depot Road, no trucks.
I just I'll get staff to reply. I just want to make sure that that we stay at the appropriate level for the discussion, which is should we pursue these funds? Not too much into the how we spend these funds, but if there's an answer to this question, I'll take it. But I just want to caution us from going down this rabbit hole at this point in time.
Through the chair, yeah, happy to respond to the answer. So as you know, we're currently working to update our transportation master plan, which is reviewing the truck routes that are identified in our traffic bylaw. And with that, we will have better direction of where the appropriate truck routes would be. And so through those considerations, if it is appropriate to have a no truck sign, we may consider it, but no guarantees.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor, for indulging me. I just couldn't resist the opportunity. Thank you.
No, that's fine. There's many a rabbit hole we can disappear down. So that's fine. I don't see any other questions here. So I'm going to move the staff recommendations together. And are you seconding that, Councilor Hamilton? Thank you. Yeah, thank you for I think it's great that we're identifying and pursuing these opportunities, and as well as advancing projects to some points made earlier by Councillor Hamilton. And I agree with the prioritization and how these things have sort of been packaged. Yeah, so thank you for that. I look forward to hearing that we were the successful applicants. And I do appreciate the process that you've as described, where we'll be pursuing Victoria from January 1st onwards, effectively, and then the depot timing is really contingent on on this application. So I appreciate that and look forward to seeing these things being implemented. Any comments, Councillor French?
Thanks, Mayor. There are some people who live on Depot Road in the Brackendale area who just want us to get on with this. So giddy up. Let's go.
All right. I will call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. So we had no late agenda items under 11, no correspondence action requested under 12. We didn't have any correspondence referred from the consent agenda, but we did have Councillor Pettingill referred the minutes of the regular meeting of October 1st, which was item 7A2. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, so on page 15 of our agenda package, the staff updates on the wood fiber LNG piece, normally, as long as the resolution is consistent, I don't raise it. Staff does their best to sort of sometimes try and capture some of the discussion. In this particular case, because I believe there has been, some challenges in getting the boat launch issues dealt with, I was, I guess, a bit concerned with the description, and I think one councillor sort of shared their opinion, but we didn't really have a discussion about it. And so, given that I'm not sure that this is all resolved finally yet, I was hesitant to leave the language there, just for fear of undermining negotiations. So I was going to propose that the note under that heading just be amended to read: a council member noted that WLNG has agreed to pay for repairs to the boat launch at Galbraith Avenue, as noted in the staff memo, and discuss their perspective on broader issues with water access and boat launch use. So I wanted to propose that amendment, and I think that just sort of avoids any debate and where there's different perspectives and so on, and just sort of leaves it to the key issue.
Okay. Procedurally, how would we accomplish that? I see this as something where we
I guess I'm moving
that
to
was in the
amend the
consent
minutes.
agenda. Oh, it was in the consent agenda. It was comments during approval of the consent agenda. I remember that, but generally we don't have capture comments in the minutes when people are speaking to a motion, which I think is what you're saying effectively here. Like
Yeah,
that whole-
sometimes we put people's discussion in, but it's not part of the resolution. And so I think if it's going to stay in the minutes, I think it's important what it says. And rather than just strike it out, I was just going to make it a bit more general where I think we're all in agreement.
I just want to go to staff on like sort of common, as I'm going to go to the minute taker on the common practice of that, because this is an interesting one where I distinctly remember these are comments made during the motion of the consent agenda. And I don't see a lot of our comments before a vote being captured in the minutes. It's really the things that were discussed with staff, the things that were, contained specifically in a motion. And to me, this is a distinct third category. Thoughts on this, or how we would go about addressing this?
Correcting the minutes is definitely at council's discretion. So the language that's included in the minutes can definitely be amended to reflect council's decision, and we can approve the amendment, or council can approve the minutes as corrected, and then by removing or by changing whichever section you'd like.
Okay, and in general practice, and this is maybe good for council to be a reminder for council, like when we're making comments before a vote, are those, as a minute taker, are those things that you generally capture?
Staff's practice is to try to reflect the conversation in general without reflecting specific comments by individual council members.
Okay, thank you. So with that in mind, I agree this is something that we should look at, because it was something that came from comments in the consent agenda. So I think that I'm comfortable with Councillor Pettingill's sort of motion, or approach, which is, to me, strikes a balance between just striking it, which I think we'd be justified in doing. But I think it's worth having it there. So I like that middle ground. But look to the group otherwise. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Hamilton, then Anderson.
Just for clarity, Councillor Pettingill put forward a motion to amend the minutes to reflect a councillor's opinion as opposed to council's opinion on a subject, or what's
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to go around to Councillor Anderson, and I think we'd likely entertain a motion from Councillor Pettingill that clarifies. Councillor Anderson.
Well, I will just simply defend the accuracy of the account as we have it here. The marine access, the lack of a barge lead as a marine access issue has been recorded since the beginning of the marine action strategy in 2016. And there's good documentation in that document about this very problem. I had no problem with wood fiber anyway, I won't belabor this, but I don't actually have a problem with that. It is as it's stated here, and I don't find it to be a perspective at all, but simply facts as recorded in district planning documents.
Well, we have a councillor that would be more comfortable with a different wording. So I'm going to invite you to bring that forward, and then we can have the discussion around the nuance of that. That'll frame us in on that. So go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, so the proposed new wording is: a council member noted that WLNG has agreed to pay for repairs to the boat launch at Galbraith Avenue, as noted in the staff memo, and discuss their perspective on broader issues with water access and boat launch use.
Okay, I'll second that for discussion, and I think I think you've spoken to it. Do you want to add to that?
Again, just for clarity, I think the way it was, and this isn't about my colleagues and what he said, but I guess how it was framed, it's easy to read as a perspective that wood fiber has limited or only part of the responsibility for what's going on there. And what I heard from the community was actually quite different, and I believe this hasn't been resolved. And so I don't want to undermine the folks having these discussions with wood fiber saying, oh, well, council thinks this isn't a big deal. It's not just all us. And so, we're not really giving you much. I want to make sure that we're supporting what I think I've heard from the community and so on. So I wanted to be just more generic about who's responsible and so on. Staff noted that wood fiber are paying, and that's acknowledged, and I would sort of like to leave it there.
Okay, any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm comfortable with the minutes as captured by staff, and I think that our staff does great work in taking the minutes. I won't be supporting this motion.
Other comments on this?
Mayor Herford, I would not. I'm happy to go along with the suggestion. My emphasis here was that we need to, above all the fray here, understand that we have a marine access issue, and it's longstanding, and it is continuing. It was before wood fiber and Fortis, and it will continue after them until we solve it. And that's really my only concern. But I do, anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm speaking in support of the motion. I think that the exact wording of these minutes I'll acknowledge aren't going to resolve a marine access issue. However, I think it's important that we know how we provide direction or take a position as a council. And this was something that was captured from a individual councillor speaking to a motion to accept the consent agenda. So I want to make sure that we're capturing our feedback in the most formal and consistent way. And I think a strong case could be made for just striking that whole piece together, because we received the consent agenda. And so I think this strikes a middle ground. So I'm happy to support it, and I think it's important that we have these discussions around the minutes when appropriate to ensure that it reflects as accurately as possible the recollection of and the intent of the group. So I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Anderson French opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We had no business arising from minutes, no committee minutes or report. Any notice of motion, council? Seeing none, we have a council staff in-camera announcements, some appointments to the advisory design panel. We've already dealt with item 19. Open question period. Any clarification related to agenda items sought by anyone in our audience? Seeing none, we check online as well, but I don't believe, no. Council or staff announcements. Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to share that the Food Policy Council met on Monday, the 7th. And it was a lengthy meeting. It was a productive meeting. I learned a lot from it. And I specifically wanted to share one item out of that meeting. The market manager with the farmers market presented to the group and indicated that the current space the market operates in is too small. The merchants who operate there have outgrown the space. There's 165 farm market members, 18 farms take advantage of our Saturday farmers markets. And the folks who organize the market are looking for their next location, and they have some excellent ideas about interim locations leading to longer term locations. They've got a fair amount of work to do, both interim and longer, more permanent. But they're doing the work, they're networking, they're making contacts. And I simply wanted to share that I think our farmers market, despite the fact that its future is uncertain, is in good hands as the organization figures out where it's going to really relocate to.
Great. Other announcements? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, I'm going to take us down a little nerdy lane here for a minute. There was a recent publication that I wanted to share. I'm going to share it with council. And I'd just like to draw everyone's attention to this paper. It was recently published in the Energy, Science and Engineering Journal. And it's entitled The Greenhouse Gas Footprint of Liquefied Natural Gas Exported from the United States. And the major takeaway from the journal is that overall, the greenhouse gas footprint then this is a quote, overall, the greenhouse gas footprint of LNG as a fuel source is 33% greater than that of coal when analyzed for a GWP of 20, which is a global warming potential of 20 years. And that's the end of the quote. We've just had a lot of conversations around this table about LNG. And historically, though these findings were predictable for those of us who've been researching the issue, historically the data has not been there because academic research is biased by whoever is paying for it. So research around fracking, for instance, is likely to be more heavily weighted towards maximizing extractive processes as opposed to measuring environmental impact. For instance, in my time as a master's student at UBC, I completed my degree in the tech wing of the Earth and Ocean Sciences. Tech is one of Canada's oldest and biggest mining companies. They paid for my project. And I encountered one graduate student whose thesis was not designed to benefit the mining industry either directly or indirectly. All this is to say, with the elections coming up, and if there's anybody from the public listening, our provincial government is going full steam ahead on fossil gas. And I think it's important to recognize that the most recent research is indicating that the narrative of LNG being a bridge fuel is clearly false. Thanks.
Okay. Others, I'm going to go to Councillor Anderson, then Pettingill.
I welcome my colleague bringing forward this article, which I've read, I have with me. And I just wish to note a couple of things. First of all, the data is concerning the upstream emissions is gathered in Texas, the Permian Basin, and there are a number of differences, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't explore what they are. And I do think that we as a Squamish Council, as we were trying to do back in Mayor Kirkham launched a committee to explore these issues, and it continued for some time into the Heinzman Council. And I was looking recently at those reports. Councillor Pettingill, at that time representing the chamber, was a member of that committee. And it's just, I think, interesting for us to reflect on all of the debates of that time and their outcomes and what we might have done differently then and what we might do ongoing to satisfy ourselves and the public about these issues of the carbon footprint of natural gas and the facilities that will be adjacent to us. But at any rate, I think it is worthwhile to point out that the data in this report is highly specific to Texas and to a different climate and different operational circumstances than we have in Northeast BC and at Squamish for the liquefaction plant. And you can't deny that, but it just means that we need to push harder to see what is the data here, what do we need to know, and I think we should be doing this ongoing. Thank you.
I want to just I'm gonna cut this one off where this is the first occasion where this isn't a council debate about whatever we want to debate as individuals. So I want to make sure that that we sort of keep this to announcements and so on. So let's not go down that path with this portion of our meeting or meetings going forward. I have Councillor Pettingill. With that, you want to?
I do, believe it or not, still have something left to say, although you cut out most of what I wanted to say. So just a reminder to everyone, voting has started. Get out and vote, or maybe sort of speak to the last point a little bit. Get out and vote. You can get voting now. Saturday is the last opportunity to vote. And the pumpkin patch will be happening in Stan Clark Park. Largely a kid-focused event, but a lot of fun. Ira will be here again. And for any of the kids that have come out to some of the other Arts Council events in the summer, we'll know and love him. So it should be a great day to come get a pumpkin and on your way to go and vote. And so I hope to see you there. And yeah, I voted. It's fast, painless, easy. So please do that.
And pumpkins don't get opportunities to vote, just to be clear on what you're suggesting, Councillor. But no, that's great. I'm looking forward to that. I've got a few things here. First is we had our first youth council meeting since we last met, and really, so it's the first opportunity to meet the group, and we've got a great group of young people that I look forward to working with on the youth council. One of the things that just for council, we wanted to sort of have more regular and formal updates to council from the youth council. So similar to ADP minutes and so on, you will see at a future meeting minutes from youth council meetings start to make their way through. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what direction that group takes and sharing that all with my colleagues here and the public more broadly. On the 16th, or sorry, the 6th, I got to use our comically large District of Squamish scissors to cut the ribbon at the new fire hall in Tantalus, on Tantalus Road, which was really great to see our work, advancing to the point of being used for its intended purpose as we wrestle with these things around our table long before they end up being in their finished state. And immediately following the opening ceremony was the open house, which is just a hit with the community. And I didn't know there was turnout gear for 6-year-olds or whatever age they start. It was just amazing to see everyone coming out ready to participate. And we also had the RCMP was there. I think BC Ambulance was there as well, if I remember correctly. It was really busy. There was so much going on. So it was great to be able to spend time with the community and to open our new facility, which I think we can all be very proud of. The next day, we had an opening ceremony of Mayoutes Park, I believe is the pronounce Mayoutes, which is the new park that's open over at the Sea and Sky development, and it had a ceremony with some Squamish Nation members there as well as the folks that from the district and from the development, from the developers team that worked on the project. And it was really reflecting on how this is a new park for downtown Squamish. Right now, it really feels like, if you're over there, it feels like it's something for the residents. And but we're a short period of time away from having that pedestrian bridge complete, and essentially a new programmed park, including a paved pump track and a kids play area. There's a basketball court. I didn't make it all the way to the north end of the park. So I think this is going to be, it's a beautiful space. And I'm looking forward to it really coming to the community, and maybe its second opening day will be the day that we open the bridge and invite downtown Squamish into the new park. So that's quite exciting what's happening there. I encourage everyone to go for a visit and see what's there in your new community park. In a similar vein, it was a heavy period of time with work with our new parks or facilities. Honiak Park, I spoke about this at the opening of the meeting. Just a land blessing on the 11th as construction's about to get underway there again with the Squamish Nation and people that have been involved in the process to get us to this point. So quite an exciting again to have another park construction about to get underway again in our downtown. And downtowns don't see addition of parks very often, so I think it's actually quite remarkable what we're seeing with our parks in our downtown at this point in time. And then that was a wonderful ceremony and got to spend some time with some folks from the Squamish Nation, including a meal after, and learn more about the protocols and hear the stories about bringing using the canoes to get to town to go shopping. Yeah, I think it was really really cool, and I think really started or continues that project in a good way. Somewhere in there, I'm trying to remember the dates. It's all a bit. There was an all candidates meeting I attended in here somewhere too. It's not on my calendar, so I forget which day that was. But I do think it's really important that people get out and vote and get involved in the democratic process. So it was great to see a relatively full facility at. I was at the one that was at Eagle Eye Theater. I know there's another one earlier in the process. So I encourage everyone to get involved and get educated and get out and vote. And I know in this sort of last run for election day, the candidates are out and about. So if they're doing an event, seek them out and let them know what your priorities are and find out where they stand on those and vote. The provincial government is something that is incredibly impactful to our work here at the municipality, and I think it's really important that they know our community's priorities, and I've done my best to convey those as I've interacted with them. But I encourage everyone to get out and do the same, and we'll see how what transpires come Saturday night after the pumpkin patch. Nope. Sorry, I thought maybe you had a question about something there. Okay, we have no motion to close. We're looking for motion to terminate. Thank you, Councillor French. Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor. Motion carries unanimously, as it should. Thank you very much, everybody. That was a long day, a dense day too.